Now, did I do a restoration voiceover video for this? I can't remember. I'm going to have to double check. But this is a paper chopper from like 1910. It seems like a copy of a Chandler and Price, which is the one I have. Made in the same exact design, shape, and manner, size, scale, weight. This is all cast iron. Everything weighs tens and tens of pounds. Like that piece right there might weigh 80 pounds. And this piece there might weigh 60 pounds. And that piece weighs 10 pounds. And that piece weighs 100 pounds. Everything is heavy. Everything was built to last. It's as if like they're all little tiny Egyptian pyramids that are meant to move around. So this was dismantled by the guy I just bought it from 25 years ago. Never put it back together. And so what you're seeing is a piece he took apart to move, and I'm putting it back together for the first time in 25 years. And the first thing I need to do is just get all the dust and dirt off it. And dust and dirt and wire wheel from Ferd was a great wire wheel. It's a cup wheel. And I just went right straight in and painted it black. I got a lot of slack for not priming it or not taking the time to smooth it out. A lot of the comments are like, what? They think this isn't a Cadillac. It's a cast iron tool. The paint is just to prevent it from rusting again. A lot of people said, oh, it's going to rust immediately. I could have just dusted it off and put it back together and the thing would work perfectly. I didn't really do anything other than clean it and paint it. So it didn't need much. I just got rid of all that lead paint, whatever the hell it was. And all the bolts moved because this was kept inside. I'm working on a restoration of a paper printer right now, and the thing's kept outside, so it's touch and go whether it's ever going to move again. But this thing was working perfect. I mean, it didn't work at all because it wasn't put together, but nothing was damaged. And that's the little slide screw part. It has a little Babbitt screw inside. You see little entryways for the Babbitt pour. Babbitt's like a lead, so you put a threaded rod in there, cap both sides of the passageway, fill it with lead, and you end up with a threaded insert. This is the paper stopper. Everything just needed to be cleaned and painted. And I'm using a Rust-Oleum oil-based paint, glossy black, which you see in pretty much any hardware store in the entire universe. Rust-Oleum must have a deal with the devil. You could walk into an abandoned hardware store in the middle of the desert and there'd be a full set-up Rust-Oleum rack. The paint that never dries. That should be the slogan. The paint that never dries, Rust-Oleum. It'll always look nice and fresh because it's never dry. And now this is a complicated, weird thing. That thing has no purpose whatsoever. I could have removed it, but it would have left a weird empty space. There's 4 screw holes. If you get another glimpse at that thing, you'll notice there's screw holes in space that have nothing. The manufacturing plate was right in the center, and that thing took up 2 of the screw holes. So when I took it off to try and figure out what the hell it was, there were 2 screw holes underneath it and 2 screw holes in space. So that's where the actual manufacturer's plate went. They took it off to put that weird thing on it that does nothing. Any guess you make will be pointless because it does nothing. I've had 10 people who make things for a living look at it and nobody can figure out why it's there. That adjustment thing doesn't move. And now this is the what would be the break. When you're about to chop paper, the part that doesn't get cut gets held down tightly by this brace. This is like the vise. And with all these little casting flanges, it made it cleaning it a pain in the ass. This is why I didn't want to do it, just because of what I'm doing right there. That little tiny die grinder end with the bristles. Those bristles were completely gone by the time this restoration was over. I love the letter stamps. All had serif faces at the turn of the century. Now you get letter stamps that are ugly little straight line letters. Harbor Freight. And there you go. So those little letter stamps were like maybe an indication of where in the production line the thing was or what it was. And that's the Babbitt pour right in the middle. You see that round circle? So they put the threaded rod in and poured the Babbitt over that. And now this is the rod that is for that same vise. And I just cleaned it up on the sander. There's some more beautiful casting letters. And this is the bottom framework of the paper chopper. And that's the lever that's going to pull down and activate the paper. And that's where that big clamp, the very first thing, gets bolted to, the first thing I worked on in the video. Like I said, it was really more about cleaning everything and repainting it. Brandon was a good help. Brandon works in the shop with us, and he did a lot of the dirty work on this with me. And there I am, just laying on some wet paint. And this is the handle to pull the paper stopper up and back. And I just use the wire wheel. I could have put it in Evaporust, but at that point I had never used Evaporust. Here it is. I buffed the edge with my old small buffing wheel, and I painted up to that edge, and then I wiped it off the chrome stuff. I say chrome in quotation marks, because it's not really chrome. Just polished metal. Now these parts were a pain in the ass because they were so heavy. But one thing I did notice, and I actually shared it with Adam Booth, you see these castings in the flat spots right there, where the casting gets put together, and then the flat spots at the other side where all the machine parts get snug together, was done on a shaper, because it has the same tooling marks. I sent the pictures to Adam Booth, and he said, yep, that looks like shaper marks. And recently he just did a surface plate, a cast iron surface plate for Fireball Tools, and he ended up with the same exact witness marks, and he showed them to me. He said, hey, remember that thing you showed me a few months ago? He goes, you're right, look, it's the same exact shaped marks. You step over from the planer. You can't see them up close. You can only see them if you're kind of right there with the piece. So these are really rusty, and that's an 11/16 11 pitch bolt hole, which is the reason why I ended up making the bolts. I made a couple of bolts for this particular bottom part. I forget what the top part was one size, the bottom parts were a different size. They really made things to last back in the day. This is why everyone got mad at me. Why didn't you smooth it out and put Bondo in it and clean it up perfectly? Because you know what? It's going to get used. This is the paper chopping blade, which I took for granted that was sharp. And it turns out it wasn't sharp at all. In fact, I tried to cut paper with it when I was very first trying to do my beauty shots, and it didn't even do anything. I had to take it all apart again and sharpen it and then put it back together. But it feels super sharp, and it almost cut across all four inside of my fingers, and I went to pick it up at one point, so I assumed it was going to cut paper, but it did not at all. It really needs to be paper. It needs to be much sharper. Anyway, I was able to sharpen it. Cleaned everything with that. That end spinny wire brush thing was the go-to tool for this. And then that's the actual blade. I'm just using my fine grinder with a big super. Look at how rusty that was. That's just from sitting inside, unused, unoiled, sitting inside. Palm sand that baby up, and that's right when I should have sharpened it, either with like a nice bastard file or something, or a nice fine file. And you'll notice this blade is made up from two other blades. Somebody welded these two blades together, so this is a custom handmade blade. And these are some of the bolts. I'm just cleaning up the bolts and just polishing the sides, and then I put it in a drill and get the dome top. And I'm using the soft side of the belt sander, if you notice. And then the same thing, just put it in the drill, buff it, and we got a nice, beautiful, polished bolt. These are the bolts that hold the razor in place. So just try to give special attention to each and every little part, and then collectively it all goes together beautifully. Or, semi-beautifully. There's that DiResta brand of paint again. And that's not the blade, that's the part that carries the blade. And some of these pieces were meant to slide together, which is why there's no paint on that little area there. That meant to slide in the two uprights. They were all machine surfaces. And this is the rod that's going to pull the blade down when you actuate the lever. It's a nice little coat of glossy black paint. And that little bend in it, I thought for a minute to straighten it out, but I thought maybe that's intentional. So I left it, and I was right. Now, this is the tail. I thought we were done. More polishing and dust removal. Spider eggs and dirt and dust. You can taste it in your mouth. You can taste it again. This is the table, which basically is the binding agent for the entire thing. This is the top. There's a nice little brass ruler in there. And I just start by just seeing how loose it needs to get. Then we palm sand that, and you see that brass ruler start to appear. and just working my way across. I like to take a mental approach of like, if I start here and go to that side, I want it to be like a cartoon animation where it just slowly envelops the whole thing. I never leave my leading edge. I never abandon the leading edge. I always just start at one edge and go until the whole thing's done. Never let go, Jack. Never leave your leading edge. Just take your leading edge till you get to the other side. Same concept with painting. Never leave your leading edge. Just keep taking that leading edge all the way over and across. See that? I'm spreading it out. Don't jump around. Somehow I jumped around. Don't do that. All right. And now is I'm making bolts. I think cap bolts. And this is my Tormach bandsaw, which I had just as a tester. I had to give it back. But it cut beautifully when it worked. And now I'm back at my lathe. And I'm just going to do a simple a drill and tap. And I really didn't know exactly how I was going to. Now I have it on back gear, super slow, run it one way, reverse auto, have it come back out. Now it fits on those bolts. And now I didn't know what I was going to do until I acted this very moment. This is right when I was like, oh, let me just use the bolt itself. Keep it in the vise, use my thing and turn it each time. And I'm using certain indicators on the bolts and the vise just so I know exactly where I am each time I open and close it. And there we go. Damn, that was easy. And I think I stick it back in the vise and put a dome on it. There you go. You see I'm just putting like a little bit of a bevel on the top just to make it look a little bit more approachable, like it's the finished bolt and not something in the machine somewhere. And there you go. I made 2 of those. That was fun. And at the point where I'm about to bolt the bottom ones on is when I run to the shop and do the other ones. But that's in reality, I made those very first. I made the bolts very first. Before I even did the restoration, I made the bolts. These are the bolts I made in that other previous video. Those are the bolts that I made. 11/16 11 pitch. I made 4 of them. And I wasn't quite sure if I had all the parts. I thought I did, but it wasn't until I was putting it together that I realized I was missing one important part, and that's the one I make out of plexiglass in the end. That's one of the bolts I made. And this thing just kept getting heavier and heavier. There's a paper stopper. There's a lead screw, puller, pusher. There's a lead screw. Zips in there. And that's a great thing. You use your paper and you pull it forward. It pulls out from underneath the razor blade. Something I don't see. I've never seen. It wasn't in my other one. Everything's going together nicely, cleanly. And these are standard size bolts, so I didn't have to remake them. There you go. Little paper chopper pin. Lever. Boom, 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 boom. Getting the right angle on that, using my antique tools. Now I think this is after I tried it once and I realized it didn't work. So this wasn't in the original video. This was after I tried to get my beauty shot. Then I went back and sharpened it. And I stuck it into the video because I did do the work. And yeah, so it's funny. What you just saw was filmed last. And what you're seeing now is filmed 3 weeks earlier. Trick of movie making. And now this is a counterweight so that when you pull the lever down, you have some help. See that gives you some help. So when you going down, you get a little bit of tug with it. And now this is the piece that was missing. It didn't need to be so thick, but I just took the opportunity to use a piece of bulletproof glass I had. It's 1 1/8 inch thick acrylic or 1 1/4 inch acrylic. And I CNC'd my name in it, of course, just to get everybody annoyed at me. And what I do with it becomes the paper stopper on the side. And of course it looks beautiful, but it doesn't suit the style, so I painted it black. much to everybody's chagrin. But when you see it, it looks like it's part of the metal casting now. I didn't get good lighting on it. And I forget what the hell I'm making here. What am I making? Pins? Oh, I have to make pins for all the parts. I forgot. Yeah, none of these parts existed. They weren't even included in the package. The blade slide mechanism pivots on these parts, made out of stainless steel. I made one, two. Ooh, slow-mo for the sexy people. And I think this dissolves it. Oh, the done part. Oh my God, this was so much fun. And there's that polished up piece that does nothing right up under the handle. And there it is. That's the vise that will hold the paper block and that will pull the paper forward. And now I think that's from behind. So if you're going to make Mr. Johnson's business cards and they're all 11 by 15, you keep that set and you're able to make the chop. Here it goes. That might have been a fake chop. Let's see, I think there's a real one coming up. This is the real one. That first one was faked. Because I had the camera all set up, I wanted to get the beauty shot, even though that it didn't cut. But then you see how you're able to pull on that lead screw and pull it through from the other side. This was a fun one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting me.